The emergency meeting room on the Zeltharian command ship buzzed with nervous energy as senior officers gathered around the holographic display. Commander Vex Corthane stood at the head of the table, his 6 arms crossed behind his back as he studied the intelligence reports floating before him. The news from their spy network in human space was troubling beyond measure. "Tell me again what our sources discovered," Corthane said to intelligence officer Zara Nethys, who immediately activated a new set of holographic data streams. "Our deep cover agents confirm it, Commander," Nethys replied, her voice carrying the weight of certainty that made Corthane's stomach turn. "The humans have achieved faster-than-light travel through a completely different method than our hyperspace technology. They call it space folding, and according to our calculations, it should be impossible." Corthane studied the technical readouts with growing alarm. For over 300 years, the Zeltharian Empire had maintained its dominance across 12 star systems through superior technology, particularly their monopoly on advanced FTL capabilities. Other species could barely manage crude warp drives that took months to cross distances the Zeltharians could cover in days. This advantage had made them the undisputed rulers of their section of the galaxy. "How long have they possessed this technology?" Corthane asked, though he suspected the answer would be worse than he hoped. "Our best estimates suggest they developed it within the last 5 years, Nethys continued. "But here is what concerns us most. The technology appears to have been developed by a single human scientist working largely alone. His name is Dr. Jake Martinez, and he operates from a remote research station in their outer asteroid belt." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. A single individual had accomplished what the greatest minds of the Zeltharian Empire had been working toward for centuries. Worse yet, if humans could master space-folding technology, their expansion into Zeltharian territory would be inevitable and unstoppable. Fleet Admiral Corvex Thane, Corthane's superior, materialized in the room through a holographic link from the capital world. His massive frame and battle-scarred hide spoke of decades of successful military campaigns. "Commander Corthane, I want your assessment of the threat level." Corthane straightened, knowing his next words could determine the fate of the Empire. "Admiral, if the humans master this technology and share it with their military forces, our strategic advantage disappears completely. Their expansion capabilities would exceed our own within a decade. We would face a species that could strike our worlds without warning and retreat before we could mount effective countermeasures. Then we eliminate the threat before it grows." Thane replied with the casual brutality that had made him legendary among Zeltharian military circles. "How do you propose we handle Dr. Martinez and his research?" "A surgical strike, Admiral," Corthane responded, activating a tactical display showing the asteroid belt system where Martinez worked. "Our intelligence indicates he works alone at this research station, with minimal security and no nearby military support. The nearest human defense installation is 8 hours away at maximum burn. We can jump in, capture Martinez and his research, and extract before any response force arrives." Thane studied the tactical situation for several minutes before nodding. "What force strength do you recommend?" "I request authorization to deploy 50 warships, including 12 heavy cruisers and 3 dreadnoughts," Corthane said. "This may seem excessive for capturing one human, but we cannot afford to underestimate a species that has achieved the impossible. Overwhelming force ensures success with minimal casualties on our side." The Admiral's expression showed approval. "Granted. Commander, I want Dr. Martinez taken alive if possible. His knowledge could prove valuable to our own research programs. However, if capture proves impossible, eliminate him and destroy all research materials. We cannot allow this technology to spread." As the meeting dissolved and officers began preparing for the largest military operation the Zeltharian Empire had mounted in decades, Corthane found himself studying the intelligence files on Dr. Martinez. The human appeared unremarkable by Zeltharian standards, relatively young, working alone, no apparent military background. Yet this single individual had potentially shifted the balance of power in the galaxy. The preparation phase took exactly 48 hours. Corthane assembled his fleet at the staging area near the edge of Zeltharian space, running continuous drills and briefings to ensure perfect execution. The mission parameters were simple: jump into the human system, locate and disable Martinez's research vessel, capture the scientist alive, secure all research materials, and retreat before human reinforcements could arrive. Intelligence updates continued to flow in during the preparation period, all confirming the same basic facts. Martinez worked alone. His research station appeared lightly defended, and the surrounding space remained clear of human military vessels. Everything pointed to a quick, clean operation that would eliminate the threat to Zeltharian supremacy. On the morning of the operation, Korthine stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching as 50 of the most advanced warships in the Zeltharian fleet prepared for hyperspace jump. Each vessel represented decades of technological advancement and millions of credits in military investment. Together, they formed the largest battle fleet assembled since the conquest of the Rigel system. "All ships report ready for jump," his navigation officer announced. "Signal the fleet," Korthane commanded. "Begin hyperspace sequence. Target human asteroid belt system. Coordinates as briefed. Time to jump, 30 seconds. As the countdown proceeded, Korthine allowed himself a moment of confidence. 50 warships against one human scientist seemed like overwhelming odds, even accounting for the unknowns surrounding human technology. Within 6 hours, the threat to Zeltharian dominance would be eliminated, and the Empire could continue its expansion without interference from upstart human innovations. "Jump complete, Commander," the navigation officer reported as the fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the target system. All ships accounted for and in formation. Korthane activated the tactical display, studying the asteroid belt where Dr. Martinez conducted his research. Long-range sensors immediately identified the human research vessel, broadcasting standard scientific beacon signals and appearing to be conducting routine operations. The ship looked exactly as intelligence had described, a civilian vessel with minimal defenses and no escort craft. "Signal all ships to assume capture formation," Korthane ordered. "Initiate approach to the target vessel. Remember, we want the human scientist alive if possible." The Zeltharian fleet moved through space like a pack of predators approaching helpless prey. Commander Korthane watched from his flagship's bridge as 50 warships spread into their predetermined formation, each vessel taking its assigned position for what should be a routine capture operation. Dr. Martinez's research vessel floated peacefully among the asteroids, its hull gleaming in the distant sunlight. The ship appeared exactly as intelligence reports had described, a medium-sized civilian craft modified for scientific research, with no visible weapon systems or defensive capabilities beyond standard shields. Long-range scans confirmed a single human life sign aboard the vessel. "Target acquired, Commander," reported Lieutenant Vexus from the sensor station. "Human vessel designation appears to be New Horizon. Single occupant confirmed. Presumed to be Dr. Martinez based on biological readings. No weapons detected, minimal shielding, no escort vessels in the immediate area." Korthane nodded with satisfaction. Everything was proceeding exactly according to plan. "Status of surrounding space? Clear of all human military presence, sir. Nearest known human installation is the defense platform at Jupiter Station, approximately 8 hours away at maximum burn. Long-range sensors show no approaching vessels or unusual activity in the system." "Excellent," Korthane replied. "Signal the boarding craft to prepare for deployment. Remember, we want the human alive and his research intact. This should be straightforward." As the fleet moved closer to their target, Korthine studied the tactical display with growing confidence. 12 heavy cruisers formed the outer perimeter, their massive weapons trained on potential escape routes. 24 destroyers created an inner ring around the research vessel, ready to disable its engines or shields if the human attempted to flee. 14 specialized boarding ships approached from multiple angles, prepared to dock with the civilian craft and secure its occupant. The human research vessel made no attempt to flee or communicate. Its engines remained at minimal power, and its shields stayed at standard civilian levels. To all appearances, Dr. Martinez was completely unaware of the massive military force converging on his position. "Sir," the communications officer called out, "we're receiving a transmission from the human vessel." "Put it through," Korthane ordered, expecting pleas for mercy or demands for explanation. Instead, a calm human voice filled the bridge, speaking in accented but clear Zeltharian language. "Hello there. I've been waiting for you." The bridge fell silent as officers exchanged confused glances. Korthine frowned at the tactical display, wondering if their approach had been detected sooner than anticipated. "Waiting for us? How did he know we were coming?" Before anyone could speculate, Dr. Martinez's voice continued over the communication channel. "I assume you're here about my research into space-folding technology. I must say 50 warships seems a bit excessive for one civilian scientist, but I appreciate the compliment. Corthane's confidence wavered slightly. Either human intelligence capabilities were far better than the Zeltharians had estimated, or something else was happening that his briefings hadn't covered. Open a channel, he commanded. Dr. Martinez, this is Commander Vex Corthine of the Zeltharian Imperial Navy. You will power down your vessel and prepare to be boarded. Comply immediately and you will not be harmed. A sound that Corthane realized was human laughter came through the speakers. Commander, with all due respect, I think you've misunderstood the situation here. Would you like me to explain what's actually happening? I know exactly what's happening, Corthane replied, his voice hardening. You're surrounded by 50 warships, your vessel is defenseless, and you have no means of escape. Surrender now, or we will disable your ship and take you by force. Oh, I'm not planning to escape, Commander, Dr. Martinez said, his tone remaining unnervingly cheerful. In fact, I'm hoping you'll stay for a while. I've prepared something special for this occasion. On the tactical display, energy readings throughout the asteroid belt began spiking in ways that made no sense according to Zeltharian physics. Corthine stared at the sensor data, trying to understand what he was seeing. The readings showed massive energy buildups, but there were no visible sources for such power generation. Sensor anomaly, Commander, Lieutenant Vexus reported, his voice tight with confusion. I'm reading energy signatures throughout the asteroid field that don't correspond to any known technology. The patterns are impossible, sir. Before Corthane could respond, space around the research vessel began to shimmer and distort. The visual distortion spread outward like ripples in water, encompassing first the nearest asteroids, then expanding toward the Zeltharian fleet. Where the distortions passed, space itself seemed to bend and twist in ways that hurt to look at directly. What is that? Corthane demanded, but his sensor officers could only stare at their readings in bewilderment. Dr. Martinez's voice came through the speakers again, now carrying a tone of scientific excitement. What you're seeing, Commander, is practical application of theoretical physics that your species hasn't discovered yet. I've spent the last 3 years turning this entire asteroid field into a 3-dimensional maze of folded space. Every asteroid, every piece of debris, every cubic meter of seemingly empty vacuum has been modified at the quantum level. The first indication that something was seriously wrong came when the nearest boarding craft reported navigation failure. Command, this is Boarding Team Alpha. Our navigation systems are showing impossible readings. We're flying straight toward the target, but our instruments say we're moving in circles. Similar reports began flooding in from across the fleet as the spatial distortions reached more ships. Vessels that should have been flying in straight lines found themselves on curved trajectories that defied physics. Weapon systems that fired at the human research vessel found their energy beams bending away from their targets and disappearing into folded space. All ships, maintain formation, Corthane ordered, but even as he spoke, he could see on the tactical display that formation was becoming impossible. Ships that appeared to be flying parallel courses were somehow converging on each other, while vessels that looked like they were on collision courses were actually moving farther apart. Dr. Martinez continued his explanation with the enthusiasm of a teacher conducting a fascinating experiment. You see, Commander, space folding isn't just about faster-than-light travel. When you can manipulate the fundamental structure of space-time itself, you can create some very interesting effects. For instance, I can make 2 points in space that appear to be light minutes apart actually exist in the same location, or I can take a straight line and fold it into a Mobius strip. A heavy cruiser on the fleet's outer perimeter suddenly reported that it was somehow inside the asteroid field, despite its instruments showing it hadn't moved from its original position. Another destroyer found its weapons firing backwards, the energy beams emerging from its rear torpedo tubes and striking its own forward shields. This isn't possible, Corthane muttered, staring at sensor readings that made no sense according to everything he knew about physics. Space doesn't work this way. Oh, but it does, Commander, Dr. Martinez replied, his voice now carrying undertones of something far less friendly than scientific curiosity. It just takes the right approach and the proper motivation. You see, 3 years ago, your people destroyed several human colonies during what you probably consider routine expansion operations. Those colonies contained about 50,000 civilians, including my wife and daughter. The cheerful tone was completely gone now, replaced by something cold and implacable. so I decided to learn everything I could about folding space, and then I came out here to wait for visitors. I've been hoping someone would come looking for my research. I have so much to show you. As if summoned by his words, gravitational forces throughout the asteroid field began shifting and intensifying. Ships found themselves pulled toward asteroids that weren't there, or repelled by empty space that somehow generated massive gravitational fields. The neat formation of the Zeltharian fleet dissolved into chaos as vessels struggled against forces that shouldn't exist. All ships attempt to break free of the anomaly field, Corthane commanded, but he already suspected it was too late. Whatever Dr. Martinez had done to this region of space, the Zeltharian fleet was now trapped in a maze where the normal rules of physics no longer applied. The next few hours revealed the true scope of Dr. Martinez's preparation, as the Zeltharian fleet discovered they were trapped in something far beyond their understanding of physics. What had appeared to be a simple asteroid field was actually a carefully constructed maze of folded spacetime, built over 3 years of methodical work by a human who had lost everything and decided to do something about it. Commander Corthane stood on his bridge, watching in growing horror as his tactical display showed impossible readings. Ships that were clearly visible through the viewports registered as being thousands of kilometers away on sensors. Weapons fired at point-blank range missed their targets completely, their energy beams vanishing into folded space only to emerge from completely different directions minutes later. Dr. Martinez, Corthane said over the communication channel, trying to maintain some semblance of control over the situation. Whatever you've done here, it ends now. Release my ships and we can discuss terms. The human's laughter filled the bridge, but there was no humor in the sound. Terms? Commander, I don't think you understand what's happening here. This isn't a negotiation. This is a demonstration of what happens when you underestimate human ingenuity, motivated by loss and grief. On the tactical display, one of the outer perimeter cruisers suddenly found itself in the middle of the asteroid field, surrounded by rocks that hadn't been there moments before. The ship's captain reported that his navigation showed he was still in his original position, but visual confirmation clearly placed him somewhere completely different. Dr. Martinez's voice took on the tone of a university professor explaining a complex concept to students. Let me help you understand what you're experiencing, Commander. 3 years ago, when your people destroyed the Kepler-7 colony where my family lived, I was a theoretical physicist working on abstract mathematics related to space-time manipulation. I had published papers suggesting that space could be folded at the quantum level, but I had never attempted practical application. Another ship, a destroyer on the inner perimeter, began reporting that its engines were running at full power, but the vessel was moving backward. The captain's increasingly frantic reports indicated that his ship's computers showed forward motion while visual references proved they were retreating from their intended destination. After the colony attack, I realized that abstract theory wasn't enough. Dr. Martinez continued. I needed practical application, so I came out here to this asteroid field and began the most comprehensive experiment in applied physics that any human has ever attempted. Every asteroid you see has been modified at the quantum level. Every piece of space debris has been turned into an anchor point for folded space. Even the empty vacuum between objects has been manipulated to create gravitational eddies and spatial distortions. Corthane studied his sensor readings, trying to find some pattern or logic that would allow his fleet to escape. Instead, he found only chaos. Ships were reporting that they were flying through solid rock while their hulls showed no damage. Other vessels found themselves somehow occupying the same space as asteroids without any collision occurring. This is impossible, Corthane said, more to himself than to his crew. Matter cannot occupy the same space. Objects cannot exist in 2 locations simultaneously. These readings make no sense. They make perfect sense if you understand the underlying physics, Dr. Martinez replied. When space is properly folded, distance becomes relative and position becomes fluid. A ship can be in 2 places at once if those places are actually the same location viewed from different dimensional angles. An object can pass through solid matter if that matter exists in folded space that doesn't intersect with the object's current dimensional orientation. To demonstrate his point, Dr. Martinez began manipulating the gravitational fields around specific ships. A heavy cruiser suddenly found itself being pulled in 6 different directions simultaneously, its hull groaning under stresses that shouldn't be possible. The ship's gravity generators screamed in protest as they tried to compensate for external forces that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. The beautiful thing about folded space, Dr. Martinez continued, his voice now carrying clear satisfaction, is that I can control every aspect of your environment. Gravity, momentum, even the basic relationship between cause and effect become tools that I can use however I choose. A boarding craft that had been approaching the human research vessel suddenly found itself moving away from its target, despite its engines pushing it forward at maximum thrust. The pilot's confused reports indicated that his instruments showed approach velocity, while visual confirmation showed increasing distance from the target. Corthane activated his fleet communication system, broadcasting to all ships simultaneously. All vessels attempt coordinated hyperspace jump. Emergency evacuation of the area. The response was immediate and terrifying. Ships throughout the fleet reported that their hyperspace generators were functioning normally, but the jump coordinates led them in circles through folded space. Vessels that entered hyperspace found themselves emerging seconds later in different parts of the asteroid field, sometimes closer to the human research vessel than when they had started. Hyperspace travel won't help you here, Commander, Dr. Martinez said, anticipating Corthane's strategy. I've folded space in dimensions that your technology doesn't even recognize. Your hyperspace generators are designed to work with normal space-time. They can't navigate through space that has been folded into shapes that exist outside your understanding of geometry. The first casualty occurred when a destroyer attempted to ram through what appeared to be empty space, only to find itself caught in a gravitational shear that shouldn't exist. The ship's hull began buckling as it was simultaneously pulled in directions that had no names in Zeltharian physics. Within minutes, the vessel was torn apart by forces that seemed to come from inside the ship itself. One ship down, Dr. Martinez announced with clinical detachment. 49 remaining. This is going to take a while, but I have nowhere else to be. Corthane realized with growing dread that they weren't facing a human scientist who had stumbled onto advanced technology. They were trapped in a carefully constructed death trap built by someone who had spent years learning how to kill specifically them. Every system, every distortion, every impossible gravitational field had been designed with Zeltharian ships and technology in mind. Dr. Martinez, Corthane said, trying once more to find some way out of the situation. What do you want? What will it take for you to release my fleet? The silence stretched for long minutes before the human responded. When his voice came through the speakers, it carried the weight of absolute finality. What I want, Commander, is for you to understand what it feels like to be helpless while someone with superior technology destroys everything you care about. What I want is for your empire to learn that humans don't make good victims. What I want is for every Zeltharian commander to know that there are consequences for attacking human colonies. Another ship, a heavy cruiser, began reporting that its hull was somehow occupying the same space as its own engines, creating impossible stress patterns that caused critical system failures throughout the vessel. The ship didn't explode. It simply ceased to function as its internal structure was folded into configurations that made no engineering sense. But mostly, Dr. Martinez continued, his voice now carrying undertones of something far darker than grief or anger. What I want is to show the galaxy what happens when you give a human nothing left to lose, and then leave him alone for 3 years to think about physics. The systematic destruction of the Zeltharian fleet began in earnest as Dr. Martinez demonstrated the true scope of his 3 years of preparation. What followed wasn't a battle in any conventional sense, but rather a methodical dismantling of 50 advanced warships by a single human who had turned the fundamental forces of the universe into his personal weapon system. Commander Corthane watched in helpless fury as his ships were picked apart one by one through methods that defied everything the Zeltharian military had learned about combat. Traditional tactics meant nothing when space itself had been weaponized against them. Orders meant nothing when ships could no longer trust their own navigation systems or even their basic understanding of which direction was forward. All ships, concentrate fire on the human research vessel, Corthane commanded, hoping that overwhelming firepower might somehow break through whatever protections Dr. Martinez had created around himself. The result was spectacular and completely useless. Energy beams from dozens of weapons converged on the new horizon, only to be bent away by folded space and redirected toward the Zeltharian ships themselves. The fleet found itself under attack by its own weapons. with energy blasts emerging from impossible angles and striking vessels that were nowhere near the original firing solutions. Dr. Martinez's voice filled the communication channels, carrying the tone of someone conducting a fascinating physics experiment. Interesting approach, Commander. You're trying to use brute force against manipulated space-time. Let me explain why that won't work. On the tactical display, Korthine could see his weapons fire being channeled through folded space. The energy beams traveling in loops and spirals that created beautiful but deadly light shows throughout the asteroid field. Some shots simply vanished into dimensional folds, while others emerged from unexpected locations with their targeting completely reversed. Energy follows the path of least resistance through space, Dr. Martinez continued, his explanation accompanied by the sight of a heavy cruiser being struck by its own weapons. When space is folded properly, the path of least resistance can be whatever I choose it to be. Your weapons are firing exactly where you aimed them. It's just that where you aimed and where the energy ends up are two completely different locations. The heavy cruiser that had been struck by redirected weapons, fire began experiencing cascade failures as its own energy beams tore through systems, designed to withstand external attack but not internal damage. The ship died slowly, its crew trapped inside a vessel being destroyed by its own defensive capabilities. Korthine ordered his remaining ships to attempt ramming attacks, hoping that physical contact might succeed where energy weapons had failed. The results were even more horrifying than the failed weapons assault. Ships that tried to ram the human research vessel found themselves somehow passing through it without making contact, then emerging on the other side, moving in completely different directions. Physical matter is just energy in a different form, Dr. Martinez explained as a destroyer passed harmlessly through his ship and then found itself on a collision course with one of its own escort vessels. When you can fold space, you can make matter behave in ways that seem impossible. That destroyer just passed through my ship, because for the duration of its transit, we existed in different dimensional orientations. The destroyer collided with its escort at full ramming speed, both ships crumpling as their hulls met in normal space despite their impossible journey through folded dimensions. The explosion lit up the asteroid field, but Dr. Martinez's research vessel remained untouched, somehow occupying the same space as the destruction, while remaining completely unaffected by it. Hours passed as Dr. Martinez continued his demonstration of applied physics. He created gravitational fields that pulled ships apart at the molecular level, folded space to trap vessels inside their own hull plating, and generated temporal distortions that caused some areas of ships to age years in seconds, while other areas remained frozen in time. One particularly disturbing demonstration involved a boarding craft whose crew found themselves somehow outside their own ship while still being inside it. Their panicked communications described the sensation of existing in two states simultaneously, able to see their own bodies sitting at control stations while also floating in vacuum outside the hull. The human mind has trouble processing non-linear dimensional existence, Dr. Martinez noted clinically as the boarding craft's crew descended into madness. Your brains are designed to understand three-dimensional space with linear time flow. When I fold space to create parallel existence states, most organic minds simply cannot cope with the contradiction. Korthane tried everything his military training had taught him. He attempted coordinated fleet movements, only to watch his ships move in formation through folded space that deposited them in random locations. He ordered full power to weapon systems, creating massive energy buildups that were channeled harmlessly away through dimensional folds. He even tried surrendering, broadcasting unconditional surrender on all frequencies. Dr. Martinez's response to the surrender attempt was immediate and chilling. Surrender isn't an option, Commander. Your people didn't offer surrender to the civilians at Kepler 7 colony. They didn't provide evacuation time for the families at Ross Station. They certainly didn't show mercy to the children at New Geneva Settlement. As if triggered by the mention of human casualties, the gravitational distortions throughout the asteroid field intensified dramatically. Ships began experiencing tidal forces that stretched their hulls like elastic, creating stress fractures that spread through the strongest military-grade materials as if they were made of glass. Do you know what I found when I analyzed the wreckage of those colonies? Dr. Martinez asked, his voice now carrying undertones of controlled rage. Your weapons were specifically calibrated to cause maximum suffering. You didn't just destroy the settlements. You made sure the deaths would be slow and painful. You turned murder into a form of psychological warfare. A group of destroyers attempting to maintain formation found themselves caught in a gravitational eddy that spun them like leaves in a whirlwind, their hulls grinding against each other as they were forced into impossible, orbital patterns around a point in space that contained no visible mass. The systematic destruction continued through the night cycle as Dr. Martinez demonstrated technique after technique for manipulating folded space. He created temporal loops that trapped ships in repeating sequences of events, dimensional mazes that caused vessels to chase their own exhaust trails in perfect circles, and gravitational lenses that focused the energy of distant stars into precise cutting beams. The beautiful thing about this approach, Dr. Martinez said as he used focused stellar radiation to slice through the hull of a heavy cruiser, is that I'm not actually creating any of these forces. I'm just redirecting energy and matter that already exists in the universe. The stars provide the cutting power. Gravity provides the crushing force. Time provides the temporal distortions. I'm simply folding space to put these natural forces where I want them to be. By the time the local star began to rise over the asteroid field, fewer than 20 Zeltharian ships remained operational. The rest had been destroyed, disabled, or trapped in dimensional folds that removed them from normal space entirely. The survivors clustered together in a tight defensive formation, their crews staring at sensor readings that showed impossible things and tactical displays that made no sense, according to any known laws of physics. Commander Corthane stood on his bridge, surrounded by the wreckage of his career and the destruction of the most powerful fleet the Zeltharian Empire had ever assembled. Around him, his officers worked frantically at stations displaying readings that hurt to look at directly, trying to find some way to escape from a trap built by a single human who had learned to rewrite the rules of reality itself. The final phase of Dr. Martinez's demonstration began as the local star reached its zenith, casting harsh light across the debris field that had once been 50 of the most advanced warships in the Zeltharian Empire. Only 12 vessels remained operational, clustered together in a desperate formation that provided no real protection against forces that treated the normal laws of physics as mere suggestions. Commander Corthane stood on his flagship's bridge, staring at tactical displays that showed impossible readings and sensor data that made no sense according to everything he had learned about the universe. Around him, his surviving officers worked at stations displaying information that seemed designed to drive viewers insane with its fundamental wrongness. Dr. Martinez, Corthane said over the communication channel, his voice hoarse from hours of shouting orders that had accomplished nothing. You've made your point. My fleet is destroyed. What more do you want? The human's response came immediately, carrying a tone of satisfaction mixed with something far more dangerous. What I want, Commander, is to make sure this message reaches your empire with perfect clarity. I want every Zeltharian military leader to understand exactly what they're dealing with when they threaten human colonies. As if summoned by his words, space around the remaining ships began to shimmer with new distortions. These weren't the chaotic gravitational eddies or dimensional mazes that had characterized the earlier demonstration. Instead, the folded space took on geometric patterns that hurt to look at directly, creating structures that existed in dimensions the Zeltharian mind couldn't fully comprehend. You see, Commander, this entire operation has been recorded in ways your people haven't discovered yet, Dr. Martinez explained, as the geometric distortions intensified around the surviving ships. When you fold space properly, you can create permanent impressions in the quantum substrate of reality itself. Every moment of your fleet's destruction has been etched into the fundamental structure of space-time. The remaining heavy cruiser began experiencing the same hull stress patterns that had destroyed earlier vessels, its massive frame groaning under forces that seemed to come from inside the ship itself. The vessel's captain reported that his hull integrity sensors showed impossible readings, with some sections of the ship apparently existing in multiple dimensional states simultaneously. But recordings aren't enough, Dr. Martinez continued, his voice taking on the tone of someone explaining a complex mathematical proof. I need to make sure the message reaches its intended audience with appropriate impact. So I'm going to do something that your physics textbooks probably say is impossible. On the tactical display, energy patterns throughout the asteroid field began converging on a single point in space near Dr. Martinez's research vessel. The convergence created a brilliant focal point that seemed to exist in several dimensions at once, pulsing with power drawn from sources that Corthane's sensors couldn't identify. I'm going to fold space in a very specific way, Dr. Martinez explained, as the energy convergence intensified. Instead of creating a fold that moves matter from one location to another, I'm going to create a fold that moves information instantaneously across any distance. Your Empire's homeworld is approximately 47 light-years from this location. Using conventional communication methods, news of your fleet's fate would take decades to reach your leaders. The brilliant convergence point suddenly expanded, creating a sphere of folded space that encompassed the entire asteroid field. Inside the sphere, the normal relationship between cause and effect seemed to break down completely. Events began happening in reverse order, with explosions occurring before their causes and ships moving backward through their own destruction sequences. But with properly folded space, Dr. Martinez said, his voice now echoing from multiple dimensional angles simultaneously, I can deliver a complete information package to your homeworld instantly, regardless of the distance involved. The message will arrive as if it were transmitted from your own capital, complete with authentication codes that your security systems will recognize as genuine. The remaining Zeltharian ships found themselves caught in the expanding sphere of folded space, their hulls beginning to experience the same dimensional stress that had destroyed their companions. But instead of being torn apart immediately, they found themselves frozen in a state of suspended destruction, held at the moment of maximum structural failure, without actually crossing the threshold into complete annihilation. The message I'm sending to your Empire contains complete technical specifications for everything I've done here, Dr. Martinez explained as reality continued to bend around the trapped vessels. Every equation, every process, every technique for folding space and manipulating the fundamental forces of the universe. But more importantly, it contains proof that this technology isn't unique to me. The sphere of folded space reached its maximum expansion and then began to contract, pulling the trapped ships toward the central convergence point with irresistible gravitational force. As they were drawn inward, the vessels began to stretch and distort, their matter being converted into pure information that could travel instantaneously across galactic distances. You see, Commander, I'm not the only human who lost family in your colonial expansion, Dr. Martinez said as the final ships were pulled into the information convergence. There are dozens of us scattered across human space, each one working on projects that your science fiction writers would consider impossible. We've learned to manipulate gravity, to fold time, to convert matter into energy and back again with perfect precision. As the last Zeltharian vessel was absorbed into the convergence point, Dr. Martinez's voice took on tones of absolute finality. But most importantly, we've learned to work together. Every breakthrough, every discovery, every new technique for bending the laws of physics is shared instantly across our network. When one of us learns something new, all of us know it within hours. The convergence point suddenly collapsed to a pinpoint of infinite density before exploding outward in a burst of pure information that traveled through folded space toward the Zeltharian homeworld. The data packet contained everything: technical specifications, recorded destruction sequences, detailed analysis of Zeltharian military capabilities, and a simple message from humanity. The message was brief and to the point. We know where you live. We know how many ships you have. We know the locations of your colonies and the names of your commanders. This is the only warning you will receive. Any future attacks on human colonies will result in consequences that make today's demonstration look like a gentle scientific experiment. But the most terrifying part of the information package wasn't the threat or the technical data. It was the revelation that Dr. Martinez represented just one node in a network of human scientists who had all lost everything and decided to do something about it. The data showed research stations scattered throughout human space, each one developing technologies that redefined what was possible when human ingenuity was motivated by loss and focused by grief. As the information burst traveled towards Zeltharian space at impossible speeds, Dr. Martinez sat alone in his research vessel, surrounded by the debris of an entire fleet. The asteroid field around him continued to pulse with residual energy from the folded space demonstration, creating beautiful light patterns that would have been spectacular if anyone had been alive to appreciate them. He activated his personal communication system and began composing his next message, this one directed toward his colleagues in the Human Research Network. The subject line was simple: Phase 1 complete. Request authorization for Phase 2 development. The message itself was longer, containing detailed analysis of Zeltharian military capabilities, suggestions for improved defensive measures around human colonies, and preliminary designs for technologies that would make today's demonstration look like a child's science project. After all, Dr. Martinez reflected as he began planning his next project. He still had work to do. The Zeltharian Empire needed to learn that humanity didn't make good victims, and there were other species in the galaxy who might benefit from similar educational experiences. In the distance, the debris of 50 warships drifted slowly through space, their wreckage serving as a monument to what happened when an advanced civilization made the mistake of underestimating human beings who had nothing left to lose and unlimited time to think about physics.